Hello everyone and welcome to the IFST webinar, Minimising Loss, Maximising Resources. This is the second in a series of webinars on food waste co-organised by IFST's Midlands branch, Food Regulatory and Sustainability Steering Groups. My name is Dr. Gavin Milligan and I am the chair of the IFST Sustainability Steering Group. When food is lost or wasted, it impacts the environment and the economy and wastes resources at a time when many people can't access enough food to eat. To better understand food loss and food waste and identify opportunities to prevent it, IFST has created this webinar series on food waste. In this second webinar today, we will explore the food loss and food waste which can occur during the growing and primary processing of food. The further webinars in this series will follow the supply chain downstream to review where food loss and waste can occur and be prevented in the retail and hospitality, consumer-facing end of the value chain. Cover the considerations with food packaging waste and share with you how food waste can be used to help feed those in need through redistribution. It's worth mentioning that our IFST Spring Conference SC21 at the end of April will also have a dedicated panel discussion session on smart packaging, addressing food packaging strategy, policy trends and solutions. So keep an eye on our IFST events page and email alerts for further details. To support understanding around this topic, IFST has already published an information statement of food waste for technical professionals to refer to and a fact sheet aimed more at the general public, and you can find these on our IFST website. If you'd like to catch up on any past IFST webinars, please visit www.ifst.org/webinars. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function which should be at the bottom of your screen. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation. We will respond to as many of these questions as possible, and I'll ask the speakers your questions. Our speakers today are Andy Mitchell of Worldwide Fruit Limited and Linda Stale of the Bellazoo Ingredient Company. Andy has 25 years experience in fresh produce, working across vegetables, salad and fruit, and now works at Worldwide Fruit as their technical and sourcing manager for soft and tropical fruits. Linda has a background in corporate social responsibility, charities and community projects, and is corporate social responsibility and foundation manager at Bellazoo Ingredient Company, where she looks after their sustainability strategy and charitable engagement. You can see more information on both of their biographies on the IFST website. And now, without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Gavin, for that introduction. I'm here today to take you through a project that we worked with RAP and Waitrose on around understanding the waste levels in an apple orchard after the final pick. This has been a really interesting project, understanding the supply chains, and I want to focus really predominantly in the farming side in my presentation. So, Worldwide Fruit, who are we? Well, we are a business that are 50% owned between New Zealand and the UK. Enza and TNG are very large and established businesses from New Zealand who are predominantly plant breeders and growers. And Fruition are a group of UK growers situated mainly in Kent and Hereford, again predominantly growing pears and apples. So you can see how our history is in top fruit, and we have a lot of investment in this area. So work around looking at improvements in waste is always the right place to go to look at top fruit first of all within our business. However, we still also do stone fruit, soft fruit, avocados and tropical within our business, and this has expanded significantly, although top fruit is still 60% of everything we do. We source from all around the world in all of our commodities, and we supply multiple retailers across all of these commodities. So Worldwide is a CI-driven business. We've embraced the world of continuous improvement, and the factory runs from end to end in the mentality of always improving itself. But we always want as well is to focus on our environmental and sustainability sides. These are really important, so not just for us, but for growers who own us and for our customers, and it's the right thing to do. So we always embrace these opportunities to look at our end-to-end supply chain, to look at seeing how we can improve what we do as a business. So, the waste project. Initially, it was scoped out just for Worldwide to look at what waste was left in the field after the final pick of 3 varieties of apple, which was Gala, Jazz and Braeburn. However, we thought it was a good opportunity while we were looking at to review again our end-to-end process, so from picking right through to the final pack that we then sell on to our customers. But also that opportunity was then discussed with Waitrose to see if we could link that process to their process to the final product that goes to the customer, and then also bring WRAP into this project in more detail around understanding waste streams and giving us advice, but also using their data around store usage of the end customer to really understand where waste is. Have we really exhausted the avenues that we have looked at in the past? In the past, we've done a lot of work in Worldwide about understanding where waste comes from, more from the back door where it's taken in and stored for a business than it has done in the orchards. But we wanted to make sure that we have looked at every opportunity and also understand with Waitrose and work together whether we could reduce in other areas of the process chain as well, or if there's opportunities that we had all missed that we could actually open up and take these opportunities to improve. Myself, I will be focusing on this presentation around the apple orchard waste, but I can pick up any questions around further waste chain reviews of this project at the end of the presentations. Why do we do pre-farm gate? Well, why have we left it to the last moment in terms of understanding a process flow? Well, I've had many conversations with growers in the past, and all growers believe they know exactly the waste levels that are found in their fields, and they know exactly what those reasons are for, and have said that because they think they have extremely low waste levels, they don't really want to spend time understanding what's left on the field or what's on the floor. It is, however, a very emotive issue, and many times do we have customers contacting us or on social media, people pointing out there's loads of apples left on the trees. These apples are left on for many reasons. Most of it is around the cost. It does cost a lot of money to take these apples off the tree. If there's no end product for these apples to go to, then a profit for the season can soon be turned into a loss. If there's not a speck in the orchard, first loss is the best loss, really. So if you can't sell it, and if it's out of spec, leaving it in the field means that it will not go through the process and be an expensive apple, which ultimately does not make the final grade. So the catalyst to actually get behind and do this was joining up with WRAP and Waitrose to do the full review. It was a significant opportunity for us, and part of our commitments as members of Courtauld 2025, we like to work alongside WRAP to do these pieces of work to show the opportunities that we can do to improve our waste reduction goals for each season. We only have one shot every year at this, so it's really important to plan this correctly, understand what we need to do, understand the information we need to collect, and also work with the growers to go into that window of opportunity to finally review the last pick of those apples. The opportunity to open up the whole supply chain was also a significant invite to make sure that this year we needed to do it. To understand all the waste streams yet again end to end, just to make that check that since we last visited, something hasn't changed. So the trial itself, as I mentioned, 3 different varieties. Gala, which is the largest grown variety in the UK, very good yielder, and the most eaten apple in the UK, a fact for you to go home with today. Braeburn is a traditional older variety, many different types of clones. Now clones are different types of a Braeburn apple, so when Braeburn apples are grown, if a certain tree starts to show a different way of growing or a different colour on the apple or different sizes, people will target these apple trees and start to take cuttings off these apple trees to improve the Braeburn offer. And finally, Jazz. This is owned by Enza, who are, of course, 50% owning of Worldwide Fruit. This is their brand, and it's the 3rd largest apple sold in the UK. and of course very important to us as a business to understand the opportunities on improving Jazz. We chose 3 different growers and applied the target, measure, act ways of working that were written by RAP to help anybody on farms assess their waste streams. So we have consistently used this way of measuring our waste that then coincides with other projects that have been done by other people, so that we're consistently delivering information that RAP can use and we can use to deliver change. We looked at all the fruit on the tree and on the floor, and all that's left after that final pick. So basically, apple tree orchards, sometimes there will be people will go in to pick the apples maybe 2 to 3 times, because not all apples are ready at the same time. So they'll pick the best ones, come in and then pick again and assess whether it's worth picking for a third. We recorded all the defects on the target, measure, act, and from that we then combined across all the growers to get an average and then work out how much potential waste was in all of these areas. So as you can see from the chart at the bottom, the Gala had the lowest waste, but still had 53 tonnes worth of waste that we could have used. Like I mentioned, it's a very high yielding crop, so 2.1% waste is a high tonnage. But you see at the other end of the spectrum, Jazz, 9.2% waste. And so that was a very interesting comparison, while Braeburn sat in the middle at 5.1. As you can see, the tonnage waste across the 3 growers' opportunities there is significant and something that we then needed to pursue. What did we see? Well, we mapped out 4 major issues. There was lack of colour of apple, the blush. So if many apples are red and green, now the red comes along for the light hours, so the more sun and light that the apples get, the more blush they get, and the more blush, the more they meet the customer specifications. So apples without the colour were left on the trees. Pitted skin. This was an issue that was seen across many growers and quite high. This is where the apples started to break down on the lenticels, the little spots on the apples, and then started to get larger and large pitted black skins. Insect and animal. This was really a mixture of maggots, birds, and other insects that just attacked the apples, and you could easily recognise that they weren't good enough to pick. And then of course the undersized apples that were found in the crops. As you can see, it's a mixture of who came top of these areas, and it's understanding these opportunities of how we can improve on all these areas. But all of these cannot be supplied, A, because they may not make the customer's specification at the end, or B, they will not make the storage period, particularly around pitted skin and insect and animals, and even light blush apples can be weaker than normal apples. So the outcomes. Well, we saw that Gala is a highly utilised crop, that the specification for small end apples can be used, as well as a specification for low colour. The issue that we found here, that there was quite a good level of pest damage in here, something that we can focus in on. Braeburn, the colour seemed to be a major issue along with size. Now, of course, we need to investigate that, but as I've talked before, clones of Braeburn can have very different colour levels. Could it be as simple as this, that some of the Braeburn clones probably need upgrading? And thirdly, Jazz has a very strict guidelines in terms of its quality to supply. As it's our brand and it's protected, we work to very tight specifications to ensure that it's not degraded. So this can drive waste into the supply chain. It's quite clear that there are areas to improve. It's more than just rotten apples that are there. So we can look and focus and put together our action plan. The key thing here is to understand that Jazz is a high value apple. This is where we can put focus and have the most significant impact to grower returns. If we half the waste of the 9.2 that we stated, we could give an extra 30 tonne per hectare back to the grower. This is the difference between a year of profit and a year of break even, if not loss. And we even found if within the 3 growers of Jazz, there was 1 grower had no issue with pitted skin. We need to understand why that is. And grower we worked with below, Robert Hinge, saw the opportunity with the apples he had in his fields he hadn't harvested to then link up with FareShare to supply 3 tonnes of his orchard unpicked fruit, which was still good enough to be supplied to FareShare and to be eaten by people. That's the equivalent of 7,180 meals that we provided, and this was a great opportunity and something that we hope to continue in the future. So it's the next steps. What have we learnt? Well, pitted skins. Is it seasonal? Last season, pitted skin wasn't so common. It's been a very different season this year, and pitted skins and breakdown on the lentil cells are much more common. We need to understand this more. It's about feeding, it's about growing the crop, but is this seasonal, and what can we do to reduce this for next season? What has grower B done to remove pitted skin on Jazz? There's must be something that he's concentrated on, done something very differently, whether it's even just where his fields are situated that have made the difference, but there's something there that we need to take learnings from. As I said, Jazz opportunities are the ones to focus on. If we can reduce waste, we'll increase returns, make this crop much more viable and sustainable, and unlock value for the future. Braeburn clones, probably an area to look at to try and improve the colour left on the apples. If we can look at when they replant for Braeburn, that we actually look at better variety clones, that will probably break down this issue and improve on the waste, and again improve the returns for these growers who've invested in the new trees. And of course we want to continue and roll this out across the growers for FareShare. Robert Hinge, who is the first person to do it from his orchard, is one of the key farmers within the Fruition Group, and now will be actively encouraging the other growers to look at this as an option to remove their waste from the fields, because some of this waste is actually a disease that might be carried over to the next season, and again that is an action to reduce any problems and increase yields for the next year. We will now be starting to pull more of this data together and really understand what we need to do next. We will then sit down with the growers in the closed season, normally around in early summer, to brief them and talk about what the options and what are the opportunities for harvest next year to improve and reduce their waste. And of course, 1 year only gives you one set of information, and in a volatile world in the weather and how that makes a significant difference in your yields and the harvest, we must really repeat this to start understanding where the opportunities are and what impact the work that we've done this year will have an impact on the harvest for the next year. Then we must combine this work in the orchard with the work that's being done currently with Waitrose and RAP to really know the end-to-end opportunities to reduce waste from the orchard right through to the end customer. So, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I will now hand over to Lindy.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, hi, I'm Linda. I work for Bella Zoo, and Bella Zoo is a Mediterranean food company, a Middle Eastern food. We provide to mainly chefs, actually, but since lockdown, we've increased our retail and we have our own web shop. So I'm going to talk about the problem of food waste very briefly, then our root causes, our response, and the next steps that we're planning to do. So the problem of food waste, I just briefly want to touch on it because RAP discovered that only 37% of people thinks food waste contributes to climate change. So people see food waste as something that is unethical, but not yet unsustainable. So 1/3 of food is wasted, and the food sector accounts for 22% of total greenhouse gas emissions and 30% of energy consumption. So if you think that 1/3 is wasted, it does account for a lot of energy being wasted. The graph is showing that while manufacture retail accounts for 25% in total, but if you look at household food waste, it's actually the biggest chunk. So food waste has a triple win. You can save money, feed more people, and you can alleviate pressure on water, land and climate. We have a couple of root causes identified. First one is supply and demand. Like all food companies, we have seasonality, consumer behavior, weather. If the weather is good, people tend to go more to restaurants. If there is a lockdown, people tend to go a bit less to restaurants. And some things you can try to predict and others are a bit more difficult. Then we have our transport. That means transport from supplier to our warehouse, but also from our warehouse to the customer or consumer. And of course, our production process. Every time we change our products, it means we have food waste because we need to clean the lines and the machines. We have breakdowns, and efficiency is a very, very big one. So, for example, changing of the products every time we change, it means we have a 10% waste per line. So our response, I'm going to talk about measuring, implementing a positive food culture, then also that it's not a handbook approach, and some of our example initiatives. So measuring, we have internally audited our processes, and we try to do it regularly. Sometimes it's good if you have a new person in the team, let them work in production, let them work in warehouse, hygiene, how does it go, how are the processes being done. And we were lucky to have Gavin actually in as an auditor from RAP, and an external pair of eyes was very helpful, and a lot of ideas came out of the audit. So we also started measuring our food waste a while ago because we have an external waste management company. But what I discovered is that it makes it very useful to break this down per area. In the next slide, you can see I have a master sheet for food waste, and we measure it against our total tons produced. So production area, canteen, NPD, QA, innovation, samples, and warehouse. Each team is actually measuring what they put into the bin. We have separate documents where they give an explanation of why it has been going to the bin. What we discovered is that production is the biggest one, but also in warehouse, when something goes wrong with supplier transport, we have a peak in our food waste. The next slide, we collaborated with, we joined the Guardians of Crop with our canteen. And what I really liked about their tool is that they make it very visual. So you implement all the data, and what comes out is a very visual way of seeing what happened, where the food waste is coming from. You can see the peak on the 14th of October, and that was actually a breakdown of one of our fridges, and all the food in that fridge had to be thrown away because it wasn't safe anymore to serve. So that gave me a better understanding of how important it is to have our regular checkups and to work together with the engineering department. So implementing a positive food culture. You can see we follow the food waste hierarchy. Well, most importantly, it's reducing food waste. Next step is feed people in need, feed livestock, composed of 100% renewable energy. And then, of course, disposal, landfill is the last resort to go to. Just a little bit about livestock. We've been looking into livestock, but the nature of our products, they contain a lot of oil. The garlic content is fluctuating. Just the whole content, it's not straightforward. So for farmers, they can't accept our food waste, unfortunately. Would be nice to have some meat that maybe has some spices and garlic in it, but unfortunately that's not happening. But yes, so positive food culture. Most important thing is to have an interdepartmental approach. We have put a couple of meetings in place to make sure communication goes well. We have a weekly short date meeting. That's for smaller batches. but we also have stock at risk meetings for bigger batches. That's quarterly. And I have a monthly food waste catch-up where I chase people to give me their data. I do want to say that we actually have the luxury of a longer shelf life. So we do recognize that if you are, for example, a sushi company, that shelf life is a lot shorter than what we can do with our olives or with our antipasti or other products. There you can see we have a mitigation hierarchy. So our planning team, we have a really, really good planning team. They have a couple of things they do before we actually throw our food in the bin. Extending shelf life is one of them. Of course, food, it needs to be legal and it needs to be safe. Then as soon as we have a damaged packaging, food safety is at risk, so it means we need to throw it away. Then the second one is blast freezing to suspend shelf life, and that has been a lifesaver, especially during the pandemic. So we can do it only with certain products, and we've had to test those products to freeze them and defrost them, not only for the product itself, but also if the packaging is able to handle the freezing and defrosting. So it is a process, but it has saved us a lot of money and a lot of fruit going to waste. Then the third one is reworking. Probably a lot of companies have this, but when some sales aren't going too well, we make our special house mix. And the house mix contains a lot of different olives, and it's always different. Surprise. Then the fourth route is the sales route. So sales, they introduce promotions to our customers. We also have our web sales. So if you buy a certain amount, you get a free bucket of olives, things like that. Very useful. And then, of course, we have our canteen and charity partners. So sometimes our canteen cooks with our ingredients. And I have a collaboration. We used to collaborate with Plan Zeros. Plan Zeros is an online platform that connects business with local charities. And recently, since the pandemic, we started working together with City Harvest because they have the ability of collecting pallets and bigger quantities of surplus food. And then, of course, we still throw things into the bin. At the moment, we have about 68 tons of food waste each year. Well, that was last year. I think with the pandemic, this year might be a bit different, unfortunately. And we donate normally around 10 tons a year, but also last year has been very different. We are tracking all our departments. So food waste is part of KPIs for warehouse, for transport, and it's part of bonuses also for canteen. So you can get bonused if you reach a certain target, but on the other hand, the costs of our food waste are also charged to the department that is responsible for it. Then communication, I communicate the costs of food waste to the business. It needs to be collected by our waste management company, but also the wins and the initiatives that we are putting in place. We have training, and then of course we had our COVID response. Just for me, for our company, it was very important. I was the dedicated person that was looking into food waste. I think the first couple of months, food waste and redistributing it took a lot of my time. You need to have that ability, of course, but once you have processes in place, it's something that the different teams can carry. So I said previously we have normally around 10 tons of food waste, donations a year. Well, during the pandemic, we were able to to donate 15 tons to, I think we had more than 45 different charities where we donated our olives and nuts to. I think a lot of charities had enough of olives for a couple of months. Some positive things, if you see the picture, is that if you donate to charities, for example, we donated to one of the charities of Princess Beatrice, and she's shared it on her social media account. and she has over 1 million followers. So the marketing team will be very thankful if things like that happen. Just a brief slide about saying that this is what we are doing, and I hope we can inspire some companies. But there is no perfect solution to food waste. It's a complex issue, and well, I think everyone has their own ways of dealing with it. What was really helpful for us was to have food waste champions. You see it very fast who is personally and professionally invested in reducing food waste, and I keep those people very engaged. Then, of course, if you start measuring, you realize what the quick wins are. It's important to start with those. They will set the tone for the rest of the project. Then quantify your waste, but also your savings. So we have a lot of initiatives, small ones, big ones. I mentioned a couple previously. So we have our in-house mix centrifuge that gets the water and the food particles separated. We're also looking into cleaning with high pressure instead of water, because we have oil-based products, and as soon as water comes in contact, we can't use them anymore. Work with bigger batches, planning. We have a lot of meetings. Canteen has regular deliveries, so they can keep an overview of what they have. Warehouse, part of KPIs. We work together with a lot of charities. Olio is a great app to look into. We have a charity status on our system, so I get a report every day of what has been put on the charity status, and I can react really quick. So yes, a lot of things. So, of course, we have a couple of next steps, because we signed up to the RAP food waste target to reduce our food waste with 50% by 2030. It's going to be a challenge, but we're definitely going for it. And I think engaging suppliers is a very important one, because if something goes wrong in the transport, it immediately means that it's a couple of hundred, sometimes 1,000 kilos of food that goes to waste that could have been avoided. Then also a recent Nielsen survey showed that 76% of consumers want help with reducing their food waste. We have a big customer base, and communicating this is very important as part of our plan to reduce food waste. Maybe we can't measure it immediately, but it does make a difference. Then, of course, we have 172 employees. If you look at the REP data of 165 kilograms of edible food is wasted per household per year, that means by engaging our employees, we could save a possible 28 tons a year of edible food waste. Communicating, giving them tools, just focus on it. I've come to the end of my presentation. I know this was maybe a less technical focused presentation. I do just want to emphasize that a lot of food is wasted due to human behavior, and making people aware of this and engaging them is a necessary addition to implementing new systems of new techniques. I hope sharing this gives you inspiration to get started or continue your fight against food waste. Feel free to contact me for any questions or if you would like more info. Thank you very much for listening, and I will now hand back to Gavin, who will guide us through the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and Andy prior to that for two very interesting presentations addressing very different parts of the value chain. We're going on to the Q&A now, and we've already got some questions coming in. And just a reminder for those of you who may be less familiar with Zoom, you can submit your questions using the Q&A function. First off, quite a specific question for Andy. On the apples, have you tried any initiatives to still commercialize blush and undersize? I'll read this out in full because it's quite specific. It sounds like they are perfectly fine to eat, perhaps through a wonky scheme with Waitrose or other retailer, or even a fruit delivery box company like Oddbox. Or could these be further processed into cider or juice? Over to you, Andy.
we have looked at using the less blush ones, and yes, they have gone into potentially Waitrose have supported and doing some on the wonky lines. The issue is actually some of them don't taste as good. Funny enough, the blush helps with the flavour as well, and also actually if it's got more sun hours and daylight hours, it stores better as well. These ones that are left, we probably also need to review our economic practices to see how we can open them up to get more like those apples to help them change. There is opportunities to supply juicers and put them into other areas. The biggest issue is the cost of picking those apples. Really, the grower has to go in and pick those apples and has to employ people to do it. So it's making sure that whatever input they put in, they at least cover their costs to remove those fruits, because actually it is good practice to remove those fruits off the tree, particularly if there's a disease such as tortoise lentil cells, where it breaks down. If you're removing that and taking it away, it means that you're not going to have an increased problem next year.
And are you able to assess the cost in year one versus the benefit in year two, or is that something you just have to do qualitatively?
It's hard, because what we find is the seasons dictate the issue. So as I said, lentil cell wasn't so much of a problem last year. We had a scab issue where there's it's like a scab forms on the apples, which again doesn't look good and also can affect the apple. But that was all driven by different weather events. So we will sit down and discuss those results with the growers, and they will come back, well, this is what we do, but we might not have the same events. So we might be able to fix it by the weather, but I think it's good practice proactively to do that practice anyway, to say, right, we'll do this anyway, because we know that if we do this, it will change the outcome regardless of what the weather does. So it's just saying we will do that anyway, and if we have a bad season, we know we've succeeded.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And Linda, although that was a very apple-specific question, just thinking in terms of olives and some of the other, excuse me, some of the fruit that you buy, how do you deal with specification issues with your suppliers around issues like color and size and so
on? Yes, we have some specifications in place, and it's the buying team that looks into what we want specifically. So if we agree on a certain size, normally we shouldn't have any small olives arriving at our warehouse. If that does happen, then I'm sure if the quality is fine, then we can still use them in a way. But if the quality, because if the taste or the color, or if there is anything that is not to what we want to sell to our customers, it happens that we divert it for donation. So then we donate those products. And on supplier level, we do, like we had some questionnaires with our suppliers, what they are doing if some of the tomatoes or olives aren't to the high standards. And the tomato suppliers are actually selling these tomatoes to make passata to another supplier, or the olives are used to press for the olive oil. I mean, there are different ways where suppliers are dealing with that, luckily.
So you've got your equivalent of cider and juice, effectively making olive oil out of the olives rather than processing them out.
Yes, I think the equivalent is called grappa, and that's from the balsamic vinegar from the grapes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and another one. This one again is very specifically for you. I think you mentioned about shelf life increases. There's a question here about how you've achieved that and what you've done to make those increases viable.
Yes, I saw the question asking about the latest improvements. So what we are using now is high pressure pasteurization for some of our products, and it increases the amount that we can pasteurize, and it also increases the shelf life without changing the taste too much. So that is definitely something that we looked into. And also I mentioned the blast freezing. So I'm not sure if that's a complete extending shelf life. It's more like you stop
certain processes at a time, and then you defrost them again. But that blast freezing has been very helpful for us too.
Okay, I'll not give you that question, Andy, because you don't process, but you can have the first go at the question on how you calculate food waste.
Well, while we were in the orchard, we used the RAP target measure RAP templates. We were part of helping develop that, but also what it enables is that everyone in produce who uses this template is measuring things in exactly the same way. So we understand the waste in the same way we take the reading. So, you know, there is probably other ways of measuring waste, but if you've got a consistent measurement, you can then effectively benchmark yourself with other areas of produce and other apple orchards, etc. So my advice would be, you know, target measure RAP one would be a great one to use, but if not, if you don't use that, make sure you're using something else somebody is using as well, so you can effectively compare. If you're using different systems, you will have waste, but do you really know if that's good waste, or you're doing well, or you need to improve? So that for me is the key thing, is make sure that you use something that you can compare to someone else who's using the same way, and the target measure ACT one is a very good system to use.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Linda, anything to add to that?
Very happy with the target measure ACT. We've been using that same one, and now just internally we just broke it down in different areas. I think for me that's helpful to reduce it, to focus different initiatives. But yes, I agree with Andy.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you who haven't seen the first webinar in this series, there was a speaker from RAP. I think you'll be able to find that webinar recording on the IFST website, so you can hear a bit more about the system that Andy and Linda just talked about. And there's specifically a question for Linda here, but again, I think there's some relevance to you, Andy, so we'll start with Linda. KPIs, what are your KPIs and how have you set them?
Yes, a lot of KPIs. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact ones from the different teams that are engaged with the food waste, but I know that our canteen, we have a KPI in reducing the actual, like the amount of food waste on a weekly, monthly base. So if he reaches a certain weight, then he's KPI'd or bonused against that. Then warehouse is having KPIs too, and production is having KPIs. I couldn't share the exact ones, I'm sorry.
And Andy, I don't think you talked specifically about personal KPIs, but I imagine you've got some kind of improvement targets that arise when you do orchard versus orchard comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, being a business is really CI driven, continuous improvement driven. We have KPIs to measure everything, and waste is one of the key KPIs. So we work from the factory right up into the fields on KPIs. So we'll assess quality of growers' products in the factory. Issues are fed back. Our procurement team have key KPIs in terms of the pack outs that are needed and the quality of fruit that comes in. We scorecard all our growers to show them their performances, and we give them references of how to improve. And in the fields, we aim for a certain yield, and really it's whatever they pick is minimal grade out, because a lot of this fruit that we pick will go into store, and you don't want to carry a problem into the store. You store it, you're going to store a product that you can't pack, or it's going to start breaking down. So it's very key that they have regular reviews, KPI performances of the fruit, so you know the sizes, the quality, the blush count, and how many times you pick the fruit. So we're a business that measures as much as possible, but probably the area we haven't measured enough, because it's quite tricky to perform, is the actual final pick that's left in the field, what we leave there.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. And a very, very specific question for Linda here. Just one of the stats that you mentioned in your presentation. You said 37% of people do not know that food waste contributes to climate change. The questioner just wants to check they heard that number right, and whether or not, are you able to provide a link to where that data came from, where that stat came from?
It's RAP data, but I'm not yet able to provide a link, but they'll hear more about that in a month probably.
Okay, right. So RAP data, if you go to rap.org.uk, you should be able to find it in some of the resources on the RAP website, perhaps. Okay, so the next question, using food waste. This is, it's not entirely clear if this is waste in the home or if this is waste in production, but let's assume it's waste from either an orchard or from a factory. So Andy, first of all, you talked a bit about, or you've covered the question, I suppose, on wonky fruit and juicing and cider and so on. Is that normally the extent of what you do? You also had your project where FareShare received 3 tons of apples from one of your growers.
Yes, the FareShare is a really key area that we use. We use it in our factory production, so all the product that doesn't quite make the standard will be supplied to FareShare. But FareShare have a very good option that they will come in and help support the cost of picking any fruit or vegetables left in the field that can be eaten, but because it's cost prohibitive to go in and actually pick it with the labour, so they will cover those costs. And you know, I would actually encourage anyone who's got the opportunity to contact FareShare and discuss that, because you've got a good opportunity to go in and remove fruit that actually probably won't store or won't make specifications. So you're investing in a product that you'll end up throwing away, but actually if someone goes in and picks it and moves it on very quickly so that other people can benefit from it, and you cover your costs. It's the difference between profit and loss in some cases. If you have to go in and do a full pick with your pickers, it can mean that you may lose you lose your cost per ton overall and could make it into a loss over the season.
Thank you. I think that's called the Surplus with Purpose Fund, if I remember rightly, and I think there are other charities which will do gleaning operations in orchards and fields as well, aren't there? Okay, Linda, one for you specifically. If products fail your internal QA tests for whatever sort of reason and have to be discarded, how do you make sure that they have the least worst environmental impact? Can they be reworked, or do you go for more environmentally friendly disposal options?
So yes, we had the mitigation hierarchy, so they can be reworked, definitely. If that doesn't work, then we still have our canteen that cooks with them, or we donate to charities. So if they're still edible, then we definitely do something else, or not control any edible food in the bin. So that's we work together with City Harvest at the moment, and they do a weekly collection. So that's been very useful. Previously, we worked with Plan Zeros. They connect with smaller charities. So if we have smaller quantities, if you have smaller quantities, then it's easy to put it on the platform, and the local charities can claim it and come and collect it, or you can drop it off. But since lockdown, we had some bigger quantities like pallets, and often the small charities, they can't come and collect. So that's when we started working with City Harvest, because they have that ability.
Okay, thank you. I suspect we have some international attendees on the call today. We are not likely to know as much as you do about the organisations in your own countries, but I'm sure there are similar charities to what Linda has just described. And I suppose as a link to that, one of the questions is asking whether or not there's some sort of discount process you might use through your web sales system for short life product to try and find a human food home for that.
Yes, we are actually looking into, so previously our sales team went out to restaurants and we had a lot of sample pots. So the sample pots were made from leftovers from production. If we have a bucket of 5 kilo of pesto, for example, but the last bucket only has 1 kilo, then that was used for sample pots. At the moment, the sales team isn't going out anymore. So we're looking into what we can do with those leftovers, if we can give them to staff, maybe sell. But at the moment, we don't sell anything like that. We mainly donate all of the leftovers. Yeah, but it's a big idea.
Thanks, Andy. That's is not an equivalent for you really in Harvest, I guess.
No, there isn't. No.
Okay. So the next question then talks about the link to emissions, the global warming link. You gave some stats in your presentation about that. What are your best tips on avoiding food waste in an environmentally friendly way, from an emissions perspective, particularly, I think? Linda, you want to kick off with that, as you mentioned the stats?
Great, happy to. And I'm not completely sure if that question is more for like household food waste, company food waste. I'm gonna cover both probably.
Sure. Okay.
So I think it starts with just not buying too much, or having a good overview of what you buy. Our canteen, they do multiple supermarket shops drop-offs a week instead of one a week, because it gives them a better overview of what's in the fridge, what they need to use. It's the same for at home. Make sure that you know what you have. And then the second one is also learn to cook with leftovers. It's not because you had it the day before, the day after, it's still fine. If you have a lot of carrots, because, well, it's winter and carrots and onions and cabbage are just the seasonal vegetables at the moment. Try new things, try to cook. And then, of course, fermenting is something that's coming up, and I've been doing that to save some food from going to the bin. Peels, you can do a lot with peels. Well, I can just continue about household, of course, sorry. But if it's for a company, you have processes in place, and I think increasing that knowledge about food not having to go to waste is a very important one. We've done a lot of engagement days, engagement weeks, gave tips, shared apps with employees to decrease our food waste in the company. And then, of course, the whole process and all the examples I talked about in the presentation.
Thank you. And Andy, is there anything that you would like to add to that in terms of what you do with reducing the emissions impact of what you do, whether through the waste or anything else, any other initiatives you have?
There's a lot of work in the whole of the supply chain from the start farming through the factory in terms of efficiency. So inputs are highly measured, so you only put them on when you need to do. So there's a lot of scientific work around making sure when you need to apply various food supplements for the apples to help them grow, or any other products. So very, very scientific, very driven, and you only give it when you need to give it to prevent a problem. What I probably would say, the big area, which again this fact sits with RAP on their systems, but 70% of all food waste comes from the home. That's where the waste is driven, and that is mainly driven by a lack of knowledge, as Linda talked about, lack of knowledge of the food and what they do with it. An example that I can put with apples is, we put a best before date on there as a guide of freshness, but people use that as a reason to say, well, it's gone past the date, I need to throw it away. We need to educate people to actually look at your product, and if it has a best before date, it means that you can reevaluate it to see if it's okay to still use past that date. We've done a lot of work to extend our shelf lives on our products to give customers as much as possible. But that for me is the key area really to focus on, is really engaging somehow with the public to really get them to understand how to utilize their food that they buy more than actually to throw it away.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And unfortunately, the clock is against us, so this is probably going to be the last question. It had to happen, a COVID-19 related question. Clearly, we've lived in a very different world for the last 10 months. So what sort of impact have you seen on food waste as a consequence of the COVID pandemic, either changes in demand or changes in your ability to run your operations? Andy, you want to start with that?
It's had a significant effect in terms of our volumes. With restaurants closing down, our volumes increased in our factory around about 30%. So food demand across all our fruit areas just rapidly increased because of that extra meal a day when people are at home having lunch. and also buying fresh fruit options rather than buying them and purchasing them at restaurants and other areas. So that made a big difference on that area. It also caused a lot of demand in terms of how to get more product from overseas across to us in better, because their sudden uplift in demand means that you've got, say, boats on the water coming across with product that you needed to then increase. And so that knock-on effect, that ripple effect, got bigger and bigger further down the chain, how to cope with those increases in demand. And the other area really is just around the people side. In the factories, it was just really looking at how we did things and making sure that, you know, we didn't put anybody at risk over those periods of times, and managed to cope with that 30% increase. It is a hugely challenging time along all areas, and I don't really think it had an impact in waste. I do think the consumer actually reduced their waste. They were starting to think about saying, well, I'm going to be buying for a week. How do I make sure I use these apples or these strawberries a bit more better? So I think, again, there'll probably be some stuff coming out about it, but there is good information about how people have improved their waste.
Thanks, Andy. And Linda?
I think for us it was the opposite than what Andy, because, well, 80% of our products, 80% of our sales go to restaurants pre-pandemic. So with restaurants suddenly closing, we had a lot of foods that we couldn't sell anymore. So that's when I started reaching out to all the different charities and diverting all the different foods. We were very lucky. A lot of the restaurants also got really active and started cooking for NHS workers, started cooking for children that stayed home. So we supplied some of our chefs with ingredients so they could cook. I think the hospitality sector has been very hands-on with all the changes and with support to everyone, although they've been a sector that was hit very hard. And of course, second time, third time, you kind of get into, you know what to do. Shelf extensions, blast freezing. The team has a better understanding of how we can divert any food from going to waste now. So it's about reacting quick.
Thank you. And that's a great example of the social, environmental and economic overlap that makes for sustainability. As I say, time is against us. So those of you who haven't been able to get your questions answered, then you'll be able to direct them to the speakers. Their details you can see on the screen now. So thanks ever so much, Linda and Andy, for your input, and thank you to everybody from around the world who's attended the webinar today. As I say, if the questions that you posed weren't answered, or questions maybe that you hadn't got round to posing you'd like to put to Andy and Linda, then you can see their contact details there. And if you're not familiar with IFST, then please go and have a look on the website, including the COVID-19 Knowledge Hub, which we sort of trailed a bit in that last question, and all sorts of online resources there, including Food Science and Technology magazine. We welcome new members, so please have a look at the membership pages if you're not members. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, keep an eye on the events coming up. We've got a few more in this series, and webinars and other topics as well. The next one in the food waste series is on the 4th of February, and there'll be a link in the end of the survey to sign up to that. So finally, thank you very much again to Linda and Andy for your contributions. Thank you to everybody who's joined. Thanks to the tech team behind the scenes at IFST for making all of this happen. Enjoy the rest of your day, and if you need to know more about food waste, then you can always go to the RAP website, where you'll find lots of useful resources there. So goodbye from all of us, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.